Hi guys, today we are going to be talking about some color theory. Okay, so we're going to look at this color wheel that we have here, and the outside you'll notice kind of just the basic 6 colors. We have our primary colors, red, yellow, and blue. We have our secondary colors, violet, orange, and green, and not pictured are the 12 tertiary colors, but they do have them right down here. Right, so our 12 tertiary colors are kind of those middle colors like red, orange, or yellow orange, or yellow green, blue violet, or red violet. Okay, so those are our tertiary colors, and we're going to be learning about complementary colors. So if you remember things from maybe middle school or elementary art, you might remember that complementary colors are across from each other on the color wheel. And this means directly across. Like if you were going to take a ruler and cut the color wheel in half, whatever was across from red, which is green, would be the complementary color. Okay, for orange, the complementary color going straight across here is blue, right? So you wouldn't go across like this. You would think about if you were cutting it in half. It would be blue. And then for yellow, it would be violet. And a quick, easy way that I remember these is that red and green are complementary colors, and they're also Christmas colors. Orange and blue are complementary colors, but they're also OKC Thunder colors. And yellow and violet are complementary colors, but they are also the Lakers colors, right? And I'm not like a big basketball fan. That's just how I remember it. Okay, so that might be an easy way for you. The tertiary colors are a little bit more tricky. And if you look at the color wheel that we have in class, you will be able to see that a little bit better. This one is just kind of a smaller condensed version of the color wheel, right? But for red orange, what the opposite of red orange, if we were to cut across here, would be blue green. Okay, if we imagine yellow orange being across here and cutting across, the opposite color would be blue violet. Those would also be considered complementary colors, okay, even though they are still both tertiary colors. What we are going to be doing is we're going to be mixing complementary colors, and we're going to be doing a range from one complementary color to the next, right? So if you chose orange, you would start with orange and you would work your way over to blue, and I'm going to show you how that's done. Okay, here on my palette, you can see that I have 2 colors put next to each other. So I'm going to be making red orange, and I'm going to be making blue green. Now I know that yellow is a very light color, and so if you're using yellow for this, you want to make sure that you are not using too much of the second color, okay? So I use a lot less red than I did yellow because I know that red can be very overpowering, and it's the same thing over here. Even though I'm making red orange and blue green, the yellow is just so much less overwhelming than these other colors. Okay, so I'm going to take my brush. I'm going to go ahead and dip this in my water cup. And I'm going to mix these and make sure I get to the right color that I'm looking for. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of mix them together. Notice that I got a decent amount of paint. You'll want a fair amount of paint to get started on this, just to make sure that you have plenty and you don't have to stop halfway through and mix up some more of that particular color. Okay, so I'm mixing this together here, just like this. And I'm pretty happy with this. I feel like this is a pretty good red-orange. I'm into it. Okay, not too shabby. Okay, now if you made this up and you thought that it was too yellow or too red, you could add a little bit more of either of those colors. Okay, but again, I knew that yellow is easily overpowered by red or by blue, and so I was very careful about that. Now, to make things a little easier for myself, I am going to, while I have this color in my brush, and before I mix up my second color, I am going to, on my paper here, make my first sample of this color. Okay, so again, I don't want to do a super teeny tiny sample. I want to be able to very easily see the transition between colors. Okay, so I'm just going to make a nice little section like this. This is maybe about an inch by inch, square-ish, roughly. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and move on to my next color here. Okay, so Let me wash this off and I'll be right back. Okay, with my cleaned brush, I am going to go ahead and mix together my blue-green and hope that I got my ratio right there. So I'm just kind of mixing it through on this area. And I do have them across from each other, so I have adequate space. Okay, and this is looking pretty green. I might add a little bit more. Yeah, I think I'm gonna add just a slight bit more blue to get that blue green instead of that nice plain green. But it is a nice color, look at that. I think it looks bluer on camera than it does in real life. But it looks like a pretty good regular green. So I am gonna add a little bit more blue to it. Not anything crazy, just a little bit, like that. And then I'm gonna mix these colors here. I think we're almost there. I'm gonna add a little bit more. It's always better to add a little bit twice than to add too much and then have to try to go back. Okay. Mix this blue in. We're almost there. Okay, I'm gonna clean my brush out and I will be right back. Okay, so my brush is washed. I ended up adding a little bit more blue just to get it closer to the kind of a teal color. So I have my two colors here and I have my first sample. Now what I'm going to do is, because I started with my red orange as my lighter color, I am going to take some of this blue and add it to this color and I'll work my way through here. Okay, so what that looks like on this part right here is that I'm taking just a little bit of that blue-green color and I'm mixing it onto my red-orange. Now, if you were using a different color, I would recommend starting with your darkest color and adding a small amount to your lighter color. So for example, if I was using yellow and purple, right, I would take a small amount of purple and add it to my yellow, okay? If I were doing blue and orange, I would take a small amount of blue and add it to my orange. Okay, so I'm taking blue green because I think it's kind of the darker color here, and I'm going to mix this into it, and I'm going to get kind of a weird color. Okay, so I'm going to mix this through, and right now it's not mixed very well. It actually kind of looks like some like Miami Dolphin colors. Okay, but I am going to mix this all the way through my sample of paint. Here, let me turn this for you. Okay, so I'm mixing this all the way through. And I'm getting a color that's slightly muted. So when we say muted, that means that it's just not as bright. Okay, it's maybe a color that you might see. It's kind of like how rainy days make everything look muted because the sun isn't as bright. Okay, but I have this color on my brush here. Okay, and I'm going to do a second sample next to it. Okay, so you should see a subtle difference between these first two. It should not be a drastic difference. If it is, you grabbed too much of that color. Okay, now without washing my brush, okay, because I'm going to be doing a lot of mixing here and it's going to be the same thing every time from this color to the next. Okay, I'm going to take from the same side every time because eventually I'm going to want to do one solid color or one solid sample of this color. So I don't want to have little dots of orange all over the place. I want to make sure that I'm keeping it to one area. So I'm going to take another small amount like this. Okay. My brush has two paint colors on it, so it's kind of like it's double loaded right now. And I'm going to mix this into my orange again. Okay, so it gets slightly more muted. It has kind of almost like a brown color to it. Okay, and for this, you might see colors that maybe you're like, oh, I don't know if this is really pretty. That's okay. That's the whole point, because usually if you're mixing the color brown, you're making complementary colors and mixing them together, right? It just depends on which complementary colors you choose, as kind of shows you which brown you might end up getting. Okay, so I'm going to do my third sample right here. Okay, and again, you can see it's a little bit darker. Okay, so I am going to do a couple more of these samples and I will be right back. Okay, so far I have added several different colors. If you'll notice my color down here, it was a lot darker. It definitely doesn't look red orange anymore. It's got kind of a brownish tint to it. And if you'll notice my blue green up here, I keep grabbing paint from the same side so that I still have all of this extra paint over here that hasn't been messed up. Okay. Very, very important that we do that. And I'm taking just a small amount of paint every time. Okay. So I'm going to kind of wipe off some of this extra paint that I have here on my brush. I'm just wiping it onto here. Okay, and again, I take a piece of this paint, right? A little bit of paint here, and I'm doing this amount every single time. So it's only moving up a slight difference in color. Okay, and then I mix this through the whole paint that I have here, this whole section of paint. Okay, it kind of ends up growing just because, I don't know, that's the nature, I guess. Right, so I go through and I mix both sides back and forth, kind of like this, to make sure it's fully mixed together. Okay, that'll help you have more success. Okay, and so I have some of this on my brush, and I'm going to scoot this over so you can see what I have so far. Do you see how my paint samples are slowly changing? They're getting darker, they're getting more of like a brown color. Okay, and I'm getting to like a really nice dark chocolatey brown. It almost reminds me of like, it's kind of like a milk chocolate type of color, but I'm going to continue on that way. You can see it's slowly getting darker, and that's from adding blue-green to red-orange. Okay, so this is what you want. You're going to have that slow change in color, and then we'll check up here in just a minute. Okay, I just finished my first row, so I go all the way across the paper, so we have this nice red-orange, and notice the further we go along, the more neutral it gets through here, right? So it doesn't necessarily look warm or cool, but then it starts turning into cooler colors over down this way. I'm running out of space here on the table. Okay, but I've ended at the end of this page right here. My next sample is going to go directly below this. I'm just going to kind of keep the chain going. Okay, so I'm going to mix my next color, a little bit more of that blue-green into my whatever color you want to call this now. It's kind of like a burnt, no, not a burnt. It's like a raw umber kind of color. Okay, but to keep this going on, I'm going to bring this little bit right here. Okay, so now I'm starting to get this kind of subdued, kind of a blue-green. It's starting to get closer to that blue-green color. Okay, and I'm going to continue on back this way. Okay, and we'll meet up in just a minute. Okay, so I'm working back through, and you can see it's getting kind of bluer as we go along. Okay, and you can see the colors on my palette are starting to look a lot closer together. I did go ahead and wash my brush out just because it was getting really like clunky with all of the paint that I had mixed through there. You don't have to mix your paint through each color just because you're basically dipping the same way every single time, and it's going to change a little bit at a time. And I feel like you kind of waste less paint if you do it that way. But I did get to the point where there was like way too much paint in my brush. So I've rinsed it out mostly in my cup. And so I'm going to go ahead and continue taking a little bit more of my blue-green color and mixing it into whatever you want to call this mixture over here. Okay. And so I'm just continually mixing it through and applying it to my paper over here. Okay, so you can see that we're getting like a nice transition. We had all these red-orange colors. They've gone all the way through. We went through a series of different browns. Okay, these browns are so great to know whenever you are painting. And then we work our way back through, and it's slowly getting back to where we'll have this color. Now, when we do our final one, I'll show you that, but when we do our final one, we're not going to dip it into here. We will do just a plain one of these. Okay. So we're going to continue on, and I will meet back up with you hopefully at the end of this painting. All right, I'm at the point where this color is looking so much like this one. I'm going to go ahead and stop. I did make it to a little over 2 rows. Okay, so I'm going to do my last one, and I've washed my brush off, so I'm getting just this pure color here. Okay, and so I'm going to take just a little bit of this blue-green, and I'm going to do my last sample on here. Okay, so you can see I have my red, orange, and it goes all the way to my blue, green down here. Okay, so I ended up with several pieces. If you notice, my samples end up getting a little bit bigger. Happens sometimes, but you do want to make them a decent size. You don't want to make them super huge, right? But you do want them to be around an inch or so. It's okay if they end up being an inch and a half by an inch and a half, but you do want them to be big enough that you can see the colors, okay, through here, but you can see the nice color transition that we have, and that is how you paint your complementary color transition.